Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines. The US backed Russia at the United Nations, voting against condemning Russia for starting the Ukraine war. President Donald Trump meets with Macron in Washington and says the conflict could end within weeks through US-Russia negotiations. Hamas says it will move on with Gaza ceasefire talks until Israel releases Palestinian prisoners. This comes as Israel expands operations in the West Bank, deploying IDF tanks for the first time in decades. South Korea's court set to hear the closing statement in Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial. This comes after his short-lived declaration of martial law in December. In Amiens, France, the country's biggest ever child sex trial kicks off. An ex-surgeon stands accused of sexually assaulting 299 victims. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is set to deliver his closing statement tomorrow in a landmark constitutional court trial that could determine his political fate. Accused of unlawfully declaring martial law in December, Yoon faces the potential of being removed from office less than 3 years into his presidency. The court's decision hinges on whether the martial law declaration, which lasted just 6 hours, was justified. Yoon maintains that his actions were a necessary response to opposition abuses, while critics argue that such a move signals a dangerous disregard for constitutional limits. As the 8 justices deliberate, the country holds its breath. If Yoon is removed, a new presidential election must be held within 2 months. For more on this discussion, I am joined by anchor and correspondent Josh Barnes. Josh, why is this trial so important for the people of South Korea?
Yes, the ramifications, Thomas, of this trial are significant. We're looking at a situation where it has both ramifications inside of South Korea, but also political ramifications within the region and potentially geopolitical ramifications as well. Now, at the moment, there is an acting president in South Korea who's been in place. That person was also a replacement of the person who took over from Yoon. But the situation for Yoon is very simple. If he's found to be guilty in this impeachment trial, he will be officially removed as the president of South Korea. We can't forget that this is all over his short-lived martial law bid imposed for just 6 hours. Now, he said during his trial that this wasn't going to be a full military-enabled martial law and that it was just to sort of ward off against the Democratic Opposition Party, who holds a majority. So he was looking to flex his muscles, and it backfired, and we know, of course, what's happened since. Specifically, there are 2 separate cases going on for Yoon, and both have ramifications for him personally, but the main one for the country is this impeachment trial. As mentioned already, 60 days after a judgment, if he is found to be guilty in this impeachment trial, it will mean that a new government, a new election needs to take place. Now, looking at Yoon specifically in a criminal trial, which is also ongoing, the ramifications for him there are much more severe. If found guilty in his criminal trial, he could be facing life imprisonment or potentially the death penalty. Now, just a quick one on this impeachment trial, when we can expect a result. Today, of course, is the final day. We're expecting a hearing imminently. Yoon may be speaking as we speak right now. We will, of course, bring you those updates. But we're expecting around a 2-week wait. There have been 2 previous impeachment trials for presidents of South Korea. One took 11 days and one took 14 days. So we will be back here revisiting whatever happens, but if there is a vote and an impeachment guilt, then there will be an election within 2 months.
We are also joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao, fellow Hudson Institute located in Tokyo. Dr. Nagao, what can you tell me about the potential political ramifications if Yoon Suk-yeol is found guilty?
Well, currently, President Yoon is under process to resign and impeachment and go to jail. But when we check what happened in the history of the South Korea's politics, in this, most of the president who lost the power need to go jail. So that's why there's a high possibility that similar situation will repeat in the South Korea politics. The problem is because of such kind of the situation, South Korea cannot decide the bold decision, even each world is changing very fast pace under President Trump. So President Trump, 1 month, we can remember that many decisions has made and try to end the Ukraine war within weeks, or try to end the war in the Middle East, and try to concentrate all of the resources against China. So under such kind of situation, South Korea's role is exists. South Korea is supporting Ukraine, or North Korea send the troops in Ukraine. So under such kind of situation, the decision is important, but South Korea cannot decide anything the next some months at least, and more longer indeed. So that's why this is a power vacuum situation. That is a serious concern, I believe. Thank you.
Dr. Nagao, if Yoon Suk-yeol is found guilty and this election does have to happen, how are the people of South Korea, including opposition blocs, reacting to this? How do you think this election might go if it does happen?
A traditional pattern will repeat, I believe. In this case, opposition party opposition party's candidate will sworn in as a president if they win the election, president election. So, but under current situation, the opinion in the South Korean people is moving. So I cannot identify which side will win finally. But losing power, the governmental party, it means opposition party's advantage. But opposition party also lost confidence in the South Korea's people. So that's why maybe uncharted world currently, but generally opposition party has advantage, I think.
Joshua, I wanted to come back to you. How is the public sentiment towards this impeachment trial and Yoon Suk-yeol as a whole, as a political leader?
Yes, I mean, there is, of course, division. There are staunch supporters of Yoon outside the court today. There have been many protesters protesting against the Chinese Communist Party, protesting against Yoon's impeachment trial itself and the criminal proceedings. But also, when Yoon was arrested, of course, that his guards, but also several hundreds, if not thousands of people were stood around his house, stopping him from being arrested for this criminal trial. Now, with a country so divided, there is, of course, support for him. So it will be interesting to see if an election does take place where the wider sort of public opinion will be. But there is division and people are letting their frustrations known. There is support for Yoon and that continues.
Dr. Nagao, I want to know what impact this impeachment trial and a possible further election could have on some of South Korea's closest international allies, like the United States, like Japan. What can you tell me?
It relies on the favor of President Trump, because before the President Yoon took find Moon Jae-in as president. But that time, the first Donald Trump's administration, he did not like President Moon Jae-in. So that's why relation between US and South Korea was very deteriorated that time. So, and President Moon Jae-in's policy is relatively pro-North Korea or engage with China. That policy itself is not popular in the Trump administration that time. So that's why that President Trump did not like him. And relation between US and South Korea was very bad that time. So if the opposition party will win, same party of the Moon Jae-in will take charge. So there's a possibility that the US and South Korea relation will be deteriorated between the two leaders, President Trump and Moon Jae-in's successor in the opposition party.
Thank you very much for joining us on that discussion. We move to some more news. Taiwan Coast Guard has detained a China-linked cargo ship, the Hong Tai 58, after an undersea cable near the Penghu Islands was disconnected. The incident occurring in the Taiwan Strait has raised alarms as tensions over Chinese grey zone activities continue to escalate. The ship, registered in Togo but crewed by Chinese nationals, was stationed near the cable at the time of the disruption. Taipei is treating this as a national security issue, especially since there have been similar incidents recently. While communications were quickly restored through other cables, the growing frequency of such a disturbance has Taiwan on high alert. We are joined by Andrew K.P. Lung, international and independent China strategist located in Hong Kong. And we're also joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao for this discussion. Andrew K.P. Lung, I wanted to come to you first, if that's all right. I was wondering, on what specific legal grounds was Taiwan able to obtain this Chinese vessel in international waters?
Well, first of all, I've got no information on whether to what extent and whether these cables have been cut. But of course, the reports of past cuts are correct. Then it is a part of a momentum of, if you like, coercion against or warning against the separatist movement. But behind it all is the often misunderstood Beijing strategy towards Taiwan. I mean, most of the Western media seems to think that Beijing will take advantage of the chaos at the moment over Ukraine and other areas to seize the opportunity to retake Taiwan. But that's not the preferred strategy of Beijing. The best strategy, of course, is unification, peaceful unification. But how is this going to happen? On two fronts. First of all, is the momentum of warnings in terms of military exercises and circumvent, perhaps even the current incidents of cutting cables, if that can be proven. But be it all, there is a definite pressure, military pressure and diplomatic pressure by isolating Taiwan diplomatically to force Taiwan to the negotiation table rather than just taking over Taiwan. Now, because the dynamics are such that the people on both sides are increasingly interacting with one another. At the height of the interaction, as many as 1 million Taiwanese, now the numbers have decreased quite significantly, but at least about 300 to 400,000 Taiwanese and their families have been living on the mainland and working on their businesses. And of course, there are many more tourists visiting both sides and many more exchanges between universities. And also, Taiwanese young people, they are going to mainland China, quite a significant number, establishing their businesses, running new restaurants and upper-class restaurants, and also Taiwan directors, film directors, and actresses are featuring Chinese films. So I think that the interaction pace is moving towards a momentum of understanding that the difference between the two sides, of course, this political situation is very different, but it's not such as to cause be all and end all battle, taking up arms to risk their own lives. I think that this building up a momentum towards a negotiation of a formula more favorable, perhaps compared to those with Hong Kong or Macau for the peaceful unification in the not too distant future.
Yes. I want Dr. Nagao. We have had allegations of these undersea cables being tampered with consistently over the past few months. What's the strategic significance of tampering with these undersea cables, and how does it affect Taiwan's national security and communication structure?
Most importantly, cutting the cable affects people's mindset. because Taiwan has, for international purpose, they have the 14 cable, 14 cable, and for the domestic purpose, 10 cable. So in total, 24. So if China catch one by one, so people cannot communicate with people in the other country, and government communication is also limited. For example, only the satellite communication is available, and other communication cannot connect with other country. This means that if they need to ask help, of course, government communication system is very limited. China can destroy all of it. So that's why this communication is very important related with the public opinion in Taiwan, which can ask the other country to help. So to persuade forcefully, this is useful for China. And but at the same time, indeed, this method is relatively easy to do because this time the Chinese try to cut, but through as an accident, not a military operation. So that's why China can cut one by one as an accident. And so as a military operation, as a strategic operation to persuade Taiwan's people forcefully, one by one they can do that. That is a big problem. But once the Taiwanese law enforcement officials arrest these ships, this is a legal matter. China can get the legitimate reason to increase pressure. That is another fact, another aspect of this incident. So China will increase the pressure toward Taiwan by exploiting this incident. So that is another aspect, and very important aspect. Step up, escalate the situation. So view from Japan, view from the U.S. that try to Taiwan. We support Taiwan very strongly. So when China try to escalate the situation, of course we must support Taiwan more strongly. That is needed. Thank you.
Yes. Andrew KP Lung, how is this situation looking in the broader Indo-Pacific, and how are international stakeholders such as neighbouring countries and telecommunications companies responding to a situation like this and Taiwan's decision to obtain this vessel?
Well, first of all, I don't think that any neighboring countries would risk the farm, as it were, to save Taiwan, putting all in. Of course, they would put in a number of measures to contain or prevent Beijing from taking military action. Because as I said, I mean, the military option is not the best option for Beijing. But be that as it may, the biggest supporter to buttress Taiwan's defense, of course, is not Japan or South Korea, it's the United States in the past. But when I said in the past, it's because Trump, before his inauguration, appeared on television holding a ballpoint pen, pointing the top of the ballpoint pen to refer to Taiwan, and a big a sphere at the back to refer to China. And then, of course, after his inaugural, and when he became the new president of the United States, he also lumped 100% tariffs on Taiwan semiconductor industry and asked Taiwan to pay up for its own defense. So I think that Trump is probably playing it both ways. But I think that the distance between Taiwan and the United States is such that, of course, the Americans sees that any strong defense of Taiwan risk a lot of the American assets. But that's not to say that they're not going to defend Taiwan. They're going to use Taiwan to play the Taiwan card. But I think that the underlying dynamic is that President Trump doesn't want to have a war, particularly a war with another nuclear power. Look at what's happening over Ukraine. The United States, even during the Biden administration, never dare to direct confrontation with Russia. The same applies to China. But then on the other hand, the reason why they are winding down the war on Ukraine, no doubt does mean that they would concentrate their efforts again to compete, to confront China in the Asia Pacific. But that doesn't necessarily lead to war.
Andrew,
Hopefully.
KP Lung and Dr. Nagel, thank you very much for joining us. We continue with more news updates. Russian missiles target Kiev amid high-stakes diplomatic talks. Ukraine declares a nationwide air alert as Russian missiles head towards Kiev. Authorities warn of major strikes and urge residents to seek shelter. On the other hand, Trump, Macron and Putin take center stage in negotiations that could shape Ukraine's future. Let's take a look at the full report.
Amid escalating tensions, Donald Trump declares the war could end within weeks. Meanwhile, the US openly backs Russia at the United Nations. Washington and Moscow align first in a morning vote at the General Assembly and again in an afternoon vote at the Security Council.
The United States sincerely appreciates Council members' support for this resolution and applauds the action, the first this Council has taken in 3 years on Ukraine, to firmly call for an end to the conflict. This resolution puts us on the path to peace. It is a first step, but a crucial one.
Да, кстати говоря, что касается новых территорий, то же самое. Мы готовы привлечь иностранных партнеров и на так называемые новые наши исторические территории, которые вернули в состав Российской Федерации. Там тоже есть запасы определенные. Мы готовы с нашими партнерами, в том числе с американскими, работать там.
В новых регионах тоже.
Да, конечно.
Diplomatic moves intensify as the UN Security Council passes a US-led resolution on Ukraine with Russian support. The resolution passes 10-0 but avoids direct criticism of Moscow. In a shift, Trump claims Putin may accept a limited presence of European peacekeepers in Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron welcomes this, stressing that Ukraine must be included in peace talks.
Только приветствуем. Мы благодарны и всем нашим партнерам, которые поднимают эти вопросы, которые стремятся к тому, чтобы мир был достигнут. И к чему я говорю? Не только европейцы, но и другие страны имеют право и могут участвовать, и мы относимся к этому с уважением.
Meanwhile, Putin escalates his rhetoric, calling Ukrainian President Zelensky a toxic figure. At the same time, Chinese President Xi Jinping reaffirms China's support for Russia, strengthening Moscow's position. As the conflict continues, Russia claims its companies are in touch with US businesses for joint projects post-war, all while global leaders discuss peace. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We will now take a look at some updates from across Europe. Germany's election winner Friedrich Merz has extended an invitation to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to visit Germany, despite an international criminal court arrest warrant against him for alleged crimes in Gaza. Merz expressed his intention to find a way for Netanyahu to travel to and from Germany without arrest, potentially challenging Germany's obligations under international law as a signatory to the Rome Statute. The ICC has reminded member states of their legal obligations to enforce its decisions. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has announced a lifelong income tax exemption for mothers with 2 or more children. This lowers the previous threshold of 4 children. This policy was set to begin in October for mothers of 3 children and in January for those with 2. The policy aims to address the country's declining birth rate and support the economy ahead of the 2026 national election. Despite the high costs, Orbán believes the reviving economy and full employment will sustain these benefits while reducing the budget deficit and public debt. Russian President Vladimir Putin has convened a meeting to discuss the enhancement of the country's railway infrastructure. The discussion focused on strategies to improve railway production and expand the network to support economic development and strategic mobility. This initiative is part of Russia's broader efforts to modernize its transportation systems and address logistical challenges. Mohamed Amra, known as The Fly, was arrested in Romania after a 9-month manhunt. He escaped in May 2024 when gunmen attacked a prison van in Normandy, killing 2 guards. 30-year-old Amra was serving time for robbery and was under investigation for murder. Authorities believe he was planning plastic surgery to hide his identity. The attack was linked to the Black Mafia family, a violent gang involved in drug trafficking. At least 24 people have been arrested. French officials praised his capture. Amra will be extradited to France. A Russian military court has sentenced a man to 16 years in prison for providing Ukraine with a data on military site near Moscow. This sentence is part of a series of similar cases where individuals have received lengthy prison terms for alleged espionage activities. For instance, in November 2024, engineer Daniil Mukhadatov was sentenced to 16 years for sharing military information with Ukrainian intelligence. Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces have signed a charter to establish a rival government, intensifying the nation's political and military turmoil. With accusations of crimes against humanity and mounting international concern, the country edges closer to deeper fragmentation and crisis. Let's take a look at this report.
Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces has signed a charter with allied political and armed groups to form a government of peace and unity amid the country's ongoing 20-month war. The signing took place behind closed doors in Nairobi, Kenya, as the Sudanese armed forces continue to make gains against the RSF in Khartoum and other regions. The RSF has been accused of crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing, with international bodies and the US raising concerns over its actions. The newly signed charter calls for a secular, democratic state with a single national army, but still allows armed groups to exist independently. Sudan's army-aligned government has rejected the parallel government, warning it will not accept any country recognizing the RSF-led administration. The United Nations has cautioned that this move could deepen Sudan's fragmentation and worsen the ongoing crisis. The conflict has killed over 20,000 people and displaced more than 14 million, creating a humanitarian disaster across the region. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now take a look at some news updates from across the Indo-Pacific region. In South Korea, Cheonan, at least 5 people have been killed and 5 others injured after a bridge collapsed. The tragedy took place at the expressway construction site in Cheonan at around 9:50 a.m. on February the 25th. 5 50-meter steel structures fell, trapping 3 workers under rubble. Authorities have launched a rescue mission to find those still missing. 4 of the injured people are in critical condition. Acting President Choi Sang-mok has ordered the urgent mobilization of resources for the operation. Chinese advisor Chen Song-si has proposed lowering the marriage age to 18 to address the country's declining birth rate. Currently, men can marry at 22 and women can marry at 20, one of the highest age thresholds globally. Chen believes this change would align with international standards and help boost demographic growth. The proposal comes as China faces a shrinking population, falling marriage rates, and lasting effects of the one-child policy. This comes despite the government allowing for up to 3 children in each family. The European Union has started easing sanctions on Syria, lifting restrictions on energy, transport, and banking to support the country's economic recovery. This decision follows the formation of an interim administration by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, with Ahmad al-Shara appointed as interim president. The EU aims to support Syria's peaceful political transition, with further sanctions to be lifted based on progress. However, they remain ready to impose measures if Syria's new leadership deviates from the inclusive government promises. Beijing defended its defense strategy spending on Tuesday, calling it entirely necessary. This comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin backed a proposal by US President Donald Trump to cut defense budgets for Russia, the US, and China. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lan Zhan emphasized that China's defense spending is vital to safeguard national sovereignty, security, and development interests. He also reaffirmed China's commitment to peaceful development and maintaining world peace. South Korea's Industry Minister Ahn Duk-kyan will visit Washington, D.C. from Wednesday to Friday to seek an exemption from U.S. steel tariffs and discuss energy and shipbuilding cooperation. This trip follows Deputy Trade Minister Park Jong-won's advocacy for tariff relief. Ahn will meet U.S. Commerce Department officials and key Congress figures amid concerns over declining South Korean exports due to the U.S. tariffs. And this is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.